Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Sober is Dope podcast. I'm your host, Pop Buchanan. And today we have another Sober is Dope superhero on the podcast. This is an episode for the elite of the elites in the recovery community, people who's been giving back for over 30 years. Our special guest today is a pioneer in the industry of recovery, and we're very excited to introduce Dr. GiGI LANGER, Ph.D. And Dr. Langer is the author of the book 50 Ways to Worry Less Now and Reject Negative Thinking. Doc, thank you for being here today. Oh, God bless. And thank you very much. Welcome to the podcast. How's everything in your world today?
Great. I'm so glad to be here, Pop. Nice to meet you. I'm glad I can see your face and we can communicate this way. It's really nice.
Yes. So Doc, in my world, and I want to get right into it because your expertise in the field of stress and anxiety is so important. And this is why, for me, I was born with somewhat of a nervous condition. I got it from my mother. And I tend to worry a lot. I at 15 years old, I had partial graying in my hair. Now, I mean, obviously I'm bald, but I'm pretty much fully gray. And I had to really learn and implement many steps in my life to mitigate the stress response, fear, anxiety, and that negative program. So your work is very influential. So I think in my case, that had a lot to do with my addiction. Mm-hmm. So today I'm 7 years sober from alcohol, and thank you so much. And for me, in order for my sobriety to be successful, I had to learn how to deal with my stress and my worry. So I'm very excited to talk to you about that today. And I just want to start out with a simple question: stress, anxiety, and fear, and its connection to alcohol. What does that mean to you?
I agree with you that I think, people who are tightly strung, tightly wound like we are, and really do seek a way out of the sensitivity, the super sensitivity to the world and the worry and I gotta do better. And so, I was very much into an achievement mode. My coping mechanism for feeling not so great about myself was to try to achieve and do well and so on. And I grew up the youngest in an alcoholic home where my dad was high functioning, but my mom was worried all the time.
Yes.
So, and I also think a key part of it is personality factor, which of course being prone to anxiety is one, but also the highly sensitive person. Some people now are calling it empath, but I think they're slightly different. There's just wonderful research by this woman, Eileen Aram, and I'll give you the link to put on the show notes, on the highly sensitive person. And she has a book about it and a great website and so on. But when I read that, it was like, oh my gosh, no wonder I had trouble coping with all the crazy, the chaos,
yes,
the sounds, the loud noises, the social. So highly sensitive people need to take time for ourselves. We feel everything a lot more than a lot of people.
Correct.
And so I think that contributes to addiction also, and the worry factor.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very stressful.
It is very stressful. So we know that there's the stress response. It's a part of our brain, the amygdala, that deals with the stress response and how we process threats in our environment. And there's a real problem today where that stress response, or what they call the parasympathetic response, right, tends to stay on. So we are in a heightened state of stress and worry all the time. And for most people, that creates somewhat of an autoimmune issue when it comes to disease and a lot of other issues, because if you're always in a stress response, your body and your cells tend to stay in a restricted state. They tend to be tight and rigid. So it's very important, especially when we look at things like the longevity effect on how to live a longer life, a healthier life, to deal with stress head on. And in your book, you have 50 tools to help people deal with worry. Now, I know it may be a lengthy process to go through all 50. Can you talk about a few top tools that you use to help with worry and stress?
Sure. Yeah. Well, when I first got sober and I stopped drinking and stopped, sexing and promiscuity and all that, I realized that I still had a real thinking problem.
Yes.
And, in the old days, one of the slogans was don't think, don't drink, and go to meetings. I mean, they
Okay.
recognized that we had a thinking problem, all of
Correct.
us. When you look at the steps, they're designed to help with a thinking problem. And you're right about the whole cortisol and, all the stress response. It's all, what I tried to do, well, first of all the things in the book are things I discovered on my own because of a situation, whether it was chronic pain or something else. So I kind of tell the story of what I was dealing with and then what tools I learned to deal with it. And I show just a little bit of the research so that people know these are not just flighty ideas.
Yes.
Some of them are spiritual.
Yes.
Some are energy work, the tapping, and some of the other.
Okay.
And then there are also the cognitive restructuring, or the ones from neuroscience.
Yes.
Because what's also true is that those brain pathways get dug in deeper and deeper the more negativity.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and so it takes reprogramming, literally.
Yes, absolutely.
And I mean, the simplest thing that people might be familiar with, the book is very familiar very popular among people in recovery, but I also wrote it for the everyday person because there are so many things we've had a chance to learn in recovery that a lot of people don't know about. So one of them is what many people have heard of, called the golden key.
Yes.
When my brain is stuck in one path and I can step back and notice that my brain is worrying and be separate from my brain and watch it, and then make a choice. I'm going to ask my brain to think about something different. And I have the power to do that.
Yes.
It's a great use of self-will or willpower. I'm going to learn how to know what my brain's doing, and I'm going to learn how to switch it into a path that's a more comfortable, positive path. So the original golden key was designed for people with a more spiritual approach. And so whenever you were worrying, the guy who developed it, Emmett Fox, would say, think about God and think of as many synonyms or other names for God as you could. So it kind of kept your brain occupied trying to think of all these different names for God. But of course, we know that our brain's default is worry. So even though we would try to focus on God, it would go back to the worry.
Yes.
And then we just very gently say, oh, there I am worrying again. Let me go back to my positive thought. So I modified it a little bit in the book to give you any phrase that you want to repeat over and over again.
Yes.
Like all is well.
Yes. Okay.
Or this is in perfect order, even though it doesn't look like it and my mind's worried. Everything is in perfect order.
Yes.
Right now, I'm perfectly fine.
Yes.
Those kinds of thoughts. Gratitude list. People can, instead of worrying, make a gratitude list, recite the serenity prayer. But the point is, it takes practice, because first we have to be aware of what we're thinking. Yes. And then we need to make the choice to change it. And then we have to notice when we went back to worrying and then make the choice again. So
I love that. I love that. And we do talk about the mallein in the brain and these brain pathways and how they have these grooves that develop from comfortable behavior patterns or our default behavior patterns and our default programming. So one of the things is our programming, our subconscious programming for when we grew up in our environment, maybe our household, for people that's adults of children of adult alcoholics tend to grow up in with a sense of stress and worry and predisposed to probably addiction because they grew up in this high intense environment, and that deals with their programming, having maybe a parent or someone always telling you something negative, or you're never gonna amount to anything, or you and it, and that kind of like stressful environment. So in your experience, did you ever have to do any work with any children of adult alcoholics, or do you see that connection between growing up maybe in an alcoholic or drug household and that leading to chronic stress and chronic anxiety?
Oh yeah, because you can look at, after I did my first inventory and worked with the alcoholism and the negative self-esteem,
Yes.
the next layer, because we heal in layers, right?
Yes,
Like
yes.
the onion. So the next layer was the dysfunctional family. And I actually went to adult children of alcoholic family meetings, 12-step meetings.
Yes.
And that was before they had their own big book and so on for ACA.
Okay.
But it
Okay.
was, and it was so helpful because it has a list of the characteristics, which I deal with in the book, of, crash and burn relationships, codependence, perfectionism, difficulty with, friendships, blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
And I looked at the list and I just about died. I thought but then I was sitting at the tables with people who were talking about how they overcame those tendencies that people from alcoholic homes have. And that gave me hope. And then with therapy and the 12 steps and all the work I did in recovery, I learned to overcome that.
Beautiful. One thing that really intrigues me about your work is that it takes into account many different avenues. It has the spirituality, it has science, it has the therapy. You talked about like structural CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and brain restructuring, tapping. I learned about tapping, which was interesting when I was studying reprogramming under Dr. Bruce Lipton. I'm not sure if you're familiar. Yeah, I love Dr. Bruce, and he was saying when you're doing energy medicine and you're repeating to yourself positive affirmations, and you have to tap in certain points where it will help that absorb. The thing that most people leave out most of the time in these self-help avenues or maybe scientific mediums is God. And God was instrumental in my story. For anyone who is family of sober is dope, they know I had to like let go of all my fears and worry, get down on my knees in the middle of the street and just say, I'm done. I'm powerless. I really understood what it meant to be powerless. Like I just done, and I gave my life back to God. Right. And that's when the healing started. Can you talk about how God worked in your life through your recovery, part of your origin story? And you did mention a little bit of the Course in Miracles. Can you tell us a little bit about God, how he worked in your life, and also the Course in Miracles?
Sure. Well, when I got to the program and I was cringing even when they said the Lord's Prayer, because I had tried to become a Christian a few times and it felt, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't turn my life over. I was still experimenting with sex and meth, I couldn't do it. But when I got to the program, I really was pretty skeptical. But I met some people. I think one of the miracles of the program, because whether people really dig into the spirituality or think of it in a way that works for them, that's something still bigger than fear.
Yes, absolutely.
But they don't like to think about it as spirituality, but they know it's something bigger than fear that's helping. For me, since I didn't have any of that spiritual background or faith, what really got me was the evidence especially the women in the rooms who saw the light in me and responded as if I was a whole, innocent, lovable, wonderful person. They didn't hold any of my background or my mistakes against me. And sometimes I hear my friends talk about that we are, for each other, we are God in skin.
I love that.
And so that love without any strings from other women was really my first, I didn't call it God, but it was my first spiritual experience, because it was bigger than my fear and my disease, and it
Mhm.
helped me get sober. Then I
Wow.
ran into some people who took me to a Unity church, not Unitarian, but Unity
Yes.
church. It's very popular with recovering people.
Yes.
And they were very into A Course in Miracles, which is a very spiritual program, but at the beginning, I thought it was cooler than the real religious sounding stuff.
Okay. Yes.
And, I mean, it's interesting, but I still study that. And I have a very eclectic spiritual practice. I think meditation is a key,
Yes.
really. Um, you wanted me to say something more about the A Course in Miracles?
No, that's fine. I know, but
Okay.
I no meditation
Yeah.
is absolutely 100% in line. So let's talk
Yeah.
about that a little
Okay,
bit.
good. And again, anybody interested in A Course in Miracles I think the best way to start is reading Marianne Williamson's book called A Return to Love. That
Okay.
gives you a wonderful entree into that whole way of looking at things. But
Thank you.
it basically helps me overcome fear.
I love it.
Um, so meditation.
Yes.
Okay, if one of our key coping mechanisms is noticing what our mind is thinking so that we can make a choice about what it's focusing on, then meditation is one of the best ways to train ourselves to notice what our mind is doing.
Yes.
Because and I've heard so many people say, oh, I can't meditate because I can't empty my mind and get to that place where good meditators get, because I can't make my mind think of nothing. Well, the people I've worked with say that is not the point.
Yes.
That is not the point. They call it a practice because we're practicing noticing where our mind is and choosing where we want it to be.
Correct.
So if we choose, I'm going to focus on my breathing, which is a very common thing.
Mhm.
I went through a course in mindfulness-based stress reduction,
Nice.
which is by John Kabat-Zinn out of the University of Massachusetts Medical Center. And it's a meditation course, it's an 8-week thing that they designed for people who had stress and chronic pain and were a mess,
Sounds
But
interesting.
what my teachers told me was the more often you have to redirect your mind, that is a victory because you noticed that it needed to be redirected.
Yes.
So the
Yes.
point isn't to never have to redirect your mind, or correct it. It's practicing, noticing, and then choosing.
Yes. What in my experience, the most beautiful part of meditation, and I studied my younger brother, Shalom Melchizedek, shout him out. He's an expert in meditation, and he has a big following online, and he studies so much. And when I was younger, I was also always into it. I didn't get successful until I really understood fundamentally that the best part of meditation is the crazy thoughts, calming down the monkey mind. And what I mean by that is when you're sitting there and you're in your silence and you're doing, whether it's your mantra or you're practicing on your intentional breathing, to sit back and notice the thoughts that come to you without no judgment, non-judgment of the thoughts that's coming to you. They could be crazy. They could be something out of a dream. They could just be the most bizarre things. I used to meditate and see giraffes selling newspapers and all type of stuff, right? But the point was, eventually, that's just the initial stage of your brain calming down. So when your mind, your mind. So when your mind is calming down and relaxing, eventually it will quiet itself. Initially, you'll start to see all of these things. And the point was to sit there in a non-judgmental silent state and to be aware of these thoughts, let them pass, get familiar with yourself in a quiet state, and eventually it's silence. And then you hit that state where good meditators go, right? That theta brain state. And so I encourage anyone who's a good book that I recommend to everyone to bring you into meditation is Light Watkins' new book, Bliss More. Excellent book. Check it out. What he does is he's an expert. He studied in Transcendental. He studied under the Vedic meditation, the same principles as Paramahansa Yogananda and our friends over there. But he brings it back to earth for us and lets us know you don't have to sit in lotus position.
Yeah.
You don't have to say a mantra if you don't have to. You don't have, it's all of these myths that need to be broken to bring meditation to the masses. So the Sober is Dope podcast is definitely invested in breaking the stigma of meditation in a way that like the negative associations people have with it. So I'm so happy that you incorporate that.
I did want to add that for many of us, guided meditations
Yes, it's
are, especially learning to meditate if we're feeling unsuccessful with a more traditional meditation or mindfulness or breathing meditation, you know, because have you heard of Rick Hanson, the Buddha brain? Yeah.
Yes, I have.
Well, so it, you know, it's a guided meditation is like a twofer because we're getting settled down and we're getting almost like a self-hypnosis, a reframing of our negative thoughts with positive ones. So I really like the app called Insight Timer.
Insight Timer.
Insight Timer. It started out just as a timer for people who were doing silent meditation.
Yes.
And then they got all these people, Tara Brach and a lot of other people who have guided meditations.
Yes.
It's very cool. I love it.
Tara Brach, that's our friend for Radical Honesty, right? Yeah, there we go. Yeah, that's what's up. I'm gonna check that out. So one thing that you mentioned, I love this, right? And I want you to kind of explain this to us. When you initially found your sobriety, you was talking about dealing with a two weeks dealing with fear, right? Sitting with your fear for 2 weeks, and that leading to eventually gaining courage. You went into gain courage mode, right? So what does that mean when you say sitting with the fear for 2 weeks? Is that part of the awareness process?
Well, I don't know if it was 2 weeks exactly.
Okay.
But when I first got sober, I was already emotionally a wreck. I was in my looking at my third divorce. I couldn't get relationships to work. I was in my late 30s, you know, and the picket fence and the 2 children and the classic, you know, dream was not happening.
Okay.
So I was very, very discouraged. But the fear thing was right after I got sober. I think it was within a year, I hurt my back really badly. I slipped and I pulled a disc and I couldn't sit for a long time. I had chronic pain for the first time in my life. I had always been kind of a jock, you know, and now and that was the pain that I was referring to in the book, where I discovered this gal named Pema Chodron.
Okay.
And her name, Pemachondron. She's Canadian, but she speaks just like we do. Yeah. And she's a Buddhist nun with a wicked sense of humor.
I like that.
And someone told me about one of her CDs called Good Medicine. But one of her best books is When Everything Falls Apart.
Oh, that's a big one. Right? Okay.
Because that's what I felt like. I had to give up drinking. I still wasn't having great, you know, I was in my third divorce by this time, and I had chronic pain and couldn't do any of my things that I normally did. And so her recommendation was to sit with the pain and be okay with it rather than letting the mind judge. And you might have noticed that the theme in the book is these whispered lies, which are the negative self-statements we give ourselves. So I would be in pain and I'd go, oh my God, it's getting worse. And I'm sitting in the wrong way. And oh my God, it's never going to get better. And those are all the whispered lies that it's the committee that's so helpful in our heads tells us. And so what she was saying was to sit with it and observe it and make friends with it, which was completely the opposite of what I wanted. And that technique really did help me slow down, because you were talking about, you know, chronic pain often is a result of oxygen deprivation in the tissues because of stress. And the system shuts down the blood flow. That's why when you get up from sitting for a long time, you might feel a little stiff or sore, you know, because the blood hasn't been going through there. So I reframed it as, oh, I just need to change, you know, I'm in pain. I just need to change my position to get more blood going through there. Instead of, oh my God, this pain is, you know, and it really, really was a very helpful teaching that she has.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Last year I developed a back injury also, and I was driving, and I think I drive for my profession back then, and I think somehow just being in the wrong position. But when I really retraced it back, it was traced back to trauma. Right, I had a really bad incident with a family member that meant a lot to me, right? So we had this negative interchange where they wrote this really bad letter to me. And I love this person. I don't know what made me read the letter, right? There's the worst thing I could have ever. It was just written so well to just destroy a person. So I read it and I was so angry and I had nowhere to put the emotions. So that leads me to when we deal with unprocessed emotions, how that affects us in our body, how that affects our stress, our bodies, our mood, right? And that led to, I think, the back disease, because I forgot which doctor said it, but it'll come back to me. But I know the body keeps the score, right? If you don't process these emotions and the trauma, if you don't deal with it, if you don't confront it, it tends to lead to trauma within the body, within the brain, that leads to depression, anxiety, and more worry and more fear. So can you talk to us about how trauma in any way and how mental health aspects of worrying in your experience and addiction overall, and how your tools can help with that?
Yeah, the whole, I mean, there's the physical trauma, but there's the emotional trauma. That's what
Yes.
we're talking about. And when I
Yes.
mentioned the layers, you know, of
Like
my
the onion.
fourth and fifth and sixth and seventh steps, where I was doing the house cleaning of the old emotions and everything,
Yes.
I was afraid to start those steps because, and even therapy I was afraid of, because I thought everything would come gushing out at once.
Yes.
And I knew there was a lot of pain down in there. And one message I always like to share is that it doesn't come out at once.
Okay.
Because my first layer that came out was the alcoholism and, you know, self-esteem, then the family of the child of the alcoholic and all those characteristics. But there was another layer that I had no idea about. And that was sexual touching that had happened in my childhood. And it was, I didn't even know, but I was talking with my sponsor and I said, oh, I saw this thing about date rape and I'm so glad it didn't happen to me. And then I felt my stomach just go like an elevator drop. Yes. But it was 5 years into recovery. Wow. So by then my higher power, who, you know, in the third step, I think regulates the speed of how quickly the pain emerges to be dealt with.
Okay, yes. Out of mercy. That's like a form of mercy, right?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
And so, you know, of course, when something arises, we always think we're not capable, but God's like a great trainer who says, yeah, you're strong enough to heal this part now.
Oh, man. Wow. I love that.
Yeah. So thank God I was in recovery, you know, but I certainly had good reasons to drink, you know, yes, and to be promiscuous and so on. So that chapter in the book was the hardest one to write, the layers, and then getting down to that one and how, you know, what I did with my therapist and other people to heal it. That was the chapter where I sought out help from an energy medicine person.
Wow.
Because I kept saying, you know, even though people might read this book and think that I'm neurotic and it'll feel horrible like my father criticizing me, I love and accept and, you know, cherish myself. And I actually had to go to a person to help me with some of the guided energy work, and it really helped.
Yes, and I want to sit with that just a bit, because you talk about having spiritual support, you talk about having a spiritual advisor, and for me, you know, I'm lucky. One of my brothers is a priest, all right, and so I could always go to him. I had to do a lot of the work on my own, but when things got difficult, I had support there. Again, my younger brother was into the meditation. A lot of people out there feel like especially when they're in their addictions. They feel like they're going through this on their own. They have to deal with this on their own. They don't necessarily have an outlet. Can you just explain to us why it's important to seek spiritual mentorship, and, you know, why you advise that? Because I'm totally for it. I urge everyone, if you're out there and you're struggling, don't be afraid to ask for help, one, and don't be afraid to seek wise counsel. Go to the church, maybe go seek out a shaman or something like that. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. That's one of the things that I make clear right at the very beginning, that this is not a go it alone project. That and becoming a healthy, high functioning person who's fulfilling the dreams that you've had for your life the whole time cannot happen alone.
Yes.
And it cannot happen if we're using substances or sex or shopping or food to stay out of touch with ourselves. So it really requires that level of honesty and support. So for me, because my therapist who helped me diagnose my alcoholism suggested I go to AA, because in 1986, when I got sober, and by the grace of God, haven't had a drink since.
Yeah, thank God.
And I met my fourth husband a year after sober, and we've been happily married for 31 years.
There we go.
But, you know, the infrastructure of AA and the whole culture is built around loving other people in the most genuine way possible. It's even hard to believe when you first go. You think, oh, these people couldn't be sincere. But it is maybe mercy, grace, whatever happens when we walk into that first meeting, and we're going to feel uncomfortable as hell. But quite often somebody comes up to us afterwards, talks to us. If we go back to that same meeting, some people greet us. Yes. We go back again, and some people know us, and we start feeling like there are some people who like us and they get us, and we don't have to pretend. And then it's like it's like little coincidences, but it isn't, where you meet just the right people, like those people, that couple that took me to the Unity Church, you know. I mean, I believe God made that happen. Absolutely. So just the right people to guide my spiritual journey, plus obviously doing the steps with my sponsor. I mean, the steps are the best way to get in touch with the higher power and learn how to let the higher power take care of us.
Absolutely.
So yeah, you need a mentor. You can't do it alone.
Yes, and I love it how you talk about the steps and AA. There's a lot of people in the podcast who are not familiar with Alcoholics Anonymous and stuff like that. In my case, I was lucky because I took an all-in approach also. First thing I had to do, I had to go to detox. I had to get on my knees in the middle of that street and get my life back to God, right? And then follow the wise instruction from God within. And like you said, that pain I was ready for at that time. I was ready to deal with it all, everything. That was the critical point of transformation. Then I went to detox. Then I went to rehab for a year. And while in rehab, I went to AA. That's the first time when I realized, wait a minute, I'm not alone, right? It's not just me. I was, as many of us born with the disease and the allergy and the brain disease of addiction and drugs and alcohol. And that's why it was helpful. And I think because I took an all-in approach after that year, I didn't really have to go back anymore. I was able to take those steps and take it into life, right? And build a high quality of life. Nice. So that brings me to my next point. You talk about stage one is getting sober, but we don't stop there, right? Stage two is the quality of life, right? Can you talk about life after sobriety, right? It doesn't stop there. Having a quality of life. The point of this podcast, just so you know, and to put it out there, is to let people know why sober is dope is because after it, your life gets better. It gets more exciting. You can live this happiness. We don't encourage people to walk around miserable in their recovery. One day at a time, that old, I'm humdrum and trudging through the pain. No, we embrace it. It's this transcendence. So talk about step two, quality of life, releasing the worry and taking it to the next level.
Yeah, that stage 2 recovery. It's like,
Yeah.
stage 1 is I got to save my life.
Yes.
Stage 2 is let's have a good life.
Okay.
So in that sense, I think a lot of the character defects that they talk about, or the, perfectionism and all those other ways that we self-sabotage,
Yes.
that is the stuff that starts getting healed during that stage 2,
Yes.
because I couldn't have written a book if I didn't have a trust. It was the scariest thing I ever did. A trust that somehow I was tapped on the shoulder and it was supposed to happen. So
Yes.
my higher power had me running up the stairs every day to type, to write the book. But the title is Reject Negative Thinking to Find Peace of Mind.
Mm.
Because if we have peace of mind and can find, use techniques to build a peaceful state, then the decisions, which in my sense come from my higher self,
Yes.
my higher power, my God in me, those decisions coming from a calm place are the right and perfect decisions for the situation,
Yes.
even if they don't immediately look like it.
Yes.
And the other, I said, find peace, clarity, because so many people say, what am I here for? What am I supposed to do? Well, you follow this spiritual path and let God guide your life and become willing to let go of the old patterns, see a therapist, do whatever it takes.
Yes.
But you get clarity, you get intuitive nudges and wisdom that lead you in directions beyond your wildest dreams,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And then the other thing is to find peace, clarity, and connection, because we form connections with just the right people.
Yes.
And we look back and we say, oh, that was such a random meeting, but what a perfect buddy this person has been to me for this long.
Yes.
And I've grown with them and they've grown with me. And of course, you hear about sponsors in AA, and it's just a way of structuring a mentorship that around staying sober and using the 12 steps to stay sober. But your life gets amazingly wonderful because it isn't that bullshit surface stuff that we're the chatting at the bar.
Yes.
Where it's this deep and nobody's really, you think you got honest because you bled your heart out on whatever happened, but it was fake. It was all
fake.
Pretending.
Yes.
And there is nothing more revitalizing and inspiring than connecting at the heart level with somebody who's being extremely honest, and you're being honest with them. It's the biggest gift I've been given in sobriety, I have to say, the connections. I have I have 3 or 4 different groups of women that are, if something scary happened, and I don't have children because I couldn't stay married long enough.
Yes.
So, if something horrible happened in my life, I feel very confident that I have several women who would show up for me, and I would not go through that horrible thing alone.
Wow.
And that to me is a source of security.
That's amazing. So quality of life, finding connectivity, finding your tribe, you being within, unleashing the God within. So this theme, you said it 100 times, and that's the biggest jewel, right? You never talked about God being something that you look for outside of yourself. You talked about a resurrection from within, because yes, we do have spirits and God is within us. I love that. My friend, Martin John Garcia, from the Recover Yourself podcast, we both definitely connected there when he first was telling me about God, and I was telling him in my recovery, I was seeking Godhead. And when I found Godhead, it was within me, my ability to step up, my ability to be humble and connect and grow that. So Doc, I'm so excited. What you're doing now, we have a bunch of tools. We're talking about therapy, right? We're talking about meditation. We're talking about finding your tribe, building your life, dealing with your worry, your anxiety, and pain. So what I want to talk about now, and the negative thoughts, the negative mind chatter, right? So when we got to get real here, because we know that there's millions of people that's going to wake up today. They may not have all the resources. This is going to be a brand new experience. They're using alcohol and drugs to cope. They're going through, they're in an abusive relationship. They grew up in a negative environment, and life is just falling apart for them. Every day their brain is telling them, you're nothing. You're not going to make it. You can't do this. Come on. No dreams. Why even go for it? Now, we know this goes right back to the amygdala, right? Our brain is hardwired to assess threats so we can have some ability to defend ourselves. So the brain does a really good job at talking you out of opportunity, right? Talking you out of your blessings sometimes, because your brain just wants you to sit in your proverbial cave and be very well protected. But what happens is it starts to tear us down because we can't tear it up. So what we tell people, what I did in my life is I started using the meditation, the positive affirmations, right? And not just that, I really started to write things down. Like I would write down a negative thought and say, like, I have to see it on paper, why I can't do this. Now, what will it take to get this done? Right. And all of the reasons why I think I can. So I would challenge myself to start that. But scientifically and just on a real medical level, on a real human level, our brains talk crap to us all day, especially in recovery. That insidious, Smeagol type Lord of the Rings voice, like the precious is like, you take the drink, and you need, right? It's toxic, but we could reverse it. Your book addresses, I think that's the fundamental thing that people struggle with, that they just can't believe they're worthy. They don't believe it. They want to, but their brain does a good job. How, and just, I know this is a big one, but what's your advice for that? For the average person that's just real, they waking up today, they don't know why their brain is doing this. They don't know where to start. Where do we start?
Yeah. It's a very empowering thought to notice what the mind is telling us. I call it whispered lies.
Yes.
And there's basically two kinds. There's, you shouldn't, and there's they shouldn't, and they should.
Right.
And, we're shoulding all over ourselves and we're separating ourselves, which is not the will of God, by judging other people as negative. So the point is that we're never going to be happy or content or peaceful until, in my experience, we have a spiritual experience, or you can frame it as the Buddha brain, the Dispensa, the brain reprogramming.
Correct.
That you build the higher healthy thoughts.
Correct.
That come in. And if you're using any kind of substances, that's a no-brainer. It's pretty hard to grow anywhere positive if you're still using.
Right.
So that said, then my whole chapter 4 is about the law of attraction, how to write affirmations.
Nice.
I have a picture of my vision board that I used right here at my desk when I was writing my book. Nice. And how to do, and then how to frame an affirmation so there's wiggle room for God's miracles in it. So it's not just I'm going to have this red Lamborghini.
Yes.
It's, or something better, or what God, as God wills. So that's in there. But the other, the disease of the soul is what A Course in Miracles would call attack on ourselves or attack on others mentally. Even if it's never physical, the minute that we attack ourselves, which our spirit was created by God, I believe, and so we really can't attack a child of God. Right. I can't attack you without it. And I have this image of this. Almost all the tools I have flow, loving, good thoughts, feelings through the channel of ourselves, because it's like these rocks of resentment and crap and negative are all stuck in here.
Yes.
And when I meditate or when I use a positive affirmation, I can almost feel the energy cleansing out and dissolving those blockages to my best self.
Nice.
So every technique is like that. I would start, if you're feeling your life is in, you know, a shithole, which
Yes.
mine was and yours was, you
Yes.
know,
Yes.
no, don't worry about it, but just do something.
Correct.
Going to a counselor or a therapist was really my first step.
Okay.
If you think you have a problem with alcohol, or my therapist said, have 2 drinks, no more, no less every day, or 2 tokes, or whatever your drug of choice is, but only do those 2 and then see if you can stop. Now, what was puzzling for me was sometimes I would have 2 drinks and stop. And other times I've had 2 drinks, 3 drinks, 4 drinks, close the bar, pick up a stranger. And so after doing the experiment for 6 months, I realized that if I had 1 drink, I could not trust myself to take good care of myself or anybody else, that I would put people in danger of myself. So that's how I had to define my own alcoholism.
That's right.
It's a wonderful journey. And I think what you said about, you know, you can use these techniques, but you could, you know, they say you can't get healthy or spiritually advanced by sitting on the mountaintop in the lotus position, right?
Right, right.
You gotta be on a journey with other people who have similar goals and interests, and those groups might change, you know, but like-minded people. I thought that Meetup, there's an app called Meetup.
Yes.
There are groups that read Eckhart Tolle's books,
Yes, that's
The
my
Power
friend.
of Now and The Good Earth. That would be a wonderful study group to start in if you don't want to go with, you know, if you're thinking, ooh, that religious stuff, ooh, then, you know, find a group that studies Eckhart Tolle's works. It's very neutral language and also the same perennial truths in my mind. In my mind, yeah.
Yes, he's a very good person. So 32 years sober, what's the secret? What's the magic sauce?
Well, for me, I did use AA. So for a person who's using 12-step programs, I go to meetings.
All right.
And even though it's been quite a while now, I still go to 2 or 3 a week. Okay. Not because I'm dying to have a drink, but because it's fellowship and affirming the power of God in our lives.
Amen. Amen.
And quite often I'll have an issue that I have to bring there, you know.
Okay.
Having a spiritual advisor, a sponsor, and going through the 12 steps is a very wonderful way to do the first layer of cleansing and healing. So working the steps with a sponsor, meetings, working the steps with a sponsor, praying and meditating.
Yes.
Reading recovery literature or listening to podcasts.
Okay.
And then helping others. Amen. Service.
There we go. That's the blueprint. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a blueprint right there. That's the recipe for success. So, Doc, before you go, can you do me one big favor? Can you tell everyone where to find your book, where to find you, how they could reach out to you, and everything that you want to say about your beautiful book? And thank you so much for that great work and for everything you contributed to the recovery community for the last 32 years. We love you, and we're so happy that you joined us today.
Thank you so much. The easiest thing to do is go to my website, and you'll see my name, you know, in the show notes, GiGI LANGER. So my website is GiGILanger.com. So that couldn't be simpler.
That's right.
On the website, I have a special deal on the paperback. I'll mail it to you free within the United States and a signed copy. I also have an audio book, and I have a few tokens, free tokens left. So if someone from your podcast goes into my website, and you know how every website has a contact?
Yes. And
you click on the contact, just send me an email with your email, and I'll send you the token to get the free audiobook. Okay. And I created a big workbook because I'm a former teacher, so there are exercises and practice exercises in the book. So I send a workbook with it. It's also available, you know, on Amazon, of course. Okay. 50 Ways to Worry Less Now.
Now, right now.
That's the name of the book. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You know, you can look for GiGI LANGER And you'll find me, or worry less now, you'll find me. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a blessing for all of us. And Gigi, thank you so much. We love you. And you're listening to the Sober is Dope podcast. I'm your host, Pop Buchanan. And that's a wrap on our amazing episode with GiGI LANGER. God bless you all, and I'll catch you on the other side. Take care.